Running a business in Philadelphia takes a lot. It takes strong relationships, unique insight, and inspired leadership. It takes staying in the know and making the most of every opportunity. Everything it takes is everything you'll find at CCPA. A resource for business support, a chance to hear from experts in their field, and get up close and personal with city leaders. An insider's guide to what's happening and what's next in Philadelphia. With CCPA, business is personal.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Suzette Munley of Munley Associates and the president of CCPA. I hope everyone's doing well and enjoying getting out in this beautiful weather and starting to see people again. I know that feels good to say that for sure. CCPA is an intimate and diverse group of business owners, executives, and managers looking to build relationships and offer each other meaningful resources. We take pride in bringing you unparalleled access to speakers, decision makers, and leaders who are shaping Center City. We keep our members and guests informed about business challenges and opportunities in Philadelphia. So let's take a minute and touch on the benefits of becoming a member, a sponsor, or collaborating with CCPA. We think it's easiest to remember as being Center City smart. We have signature events where you get the inside scoop on development, sustainability, exceptional women leaders, and the city's movers and shakers. There are marketing opportunities available only to members and sponsors, enabling you to reach thousands of businesses and consumers. You have access to our speakers and panelists in a way few organizations can deliver. The up-close, intimate, and personal experience of a CCPA event is like no other. You can reimagine employee benefits available to members through Penworth Financial Services, and you can take the lead with opportunities to build your network, grow your business, and be a CCPA ambassador. So if you'd like to join today, there is a link posted in the chat. And to mark your calendars for our upcoming events, they are posted now on your screen. So please take note of those. A special call out for our next Sustainable Philadelphia event, Building a Clean Energy Economy and Sustainable Communities for Future Generations on September 17th. CCPA understands that a healthy city with clean air to breathe, fresh water to drink, and parks and open spaces for recreation are the building blocks for strong economic activity. A city where people want to work, live, raise families, and enjoy life in a healthy urban environment. And this is what we want for our city and why we created this series. So for today's event, we encourage you to use the chat to ask questions or comment and to connect with each other. And you can also find a link to today's program there. I'd like to acknowledge our sustaining sponsor and our preferred benefits provider, Michael Craig of Penworth Financial Services. And we are pleased to collaborate with and welcome members of the Building Industry Association of Philadelphia and the Energy Co-op. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Nathan Boone is the Senior Program Officer for Watershed Protection with the William Penn Foundation, where he supports science and data-driven approaches to protect and restore the Delaware River watershed, which is the drinking water source for New York City, Philadelphia, Trenton, and Wilmington. Before joining the foundation in 2012, Nathan worked with the consulting firm Booz Allen Hamilton, providing strategic planning and portfolio management services. Nathan was previously embedded in Francophone Cameroon with the nonprofit Breaking Ground, engaged with a local municipality in water quality analysis and health impact assessment. Nathan holds an MA and a BA in Earth and Environmental Science from Wesleyan University and a graduate certificate in Environmental Science, Health and Policy from the George Washington University School of Public Health. Mark Camarata is the Deputy Water Commissioner for Planning and Environmental Services for the Philadelphia Water Department. His responsibilities include the integration, direction, and management of the department's planning initiatives and environmental programs focused on wet weather compliance, source water protection, green infrastructure implementation, facility and linear asset renewal and replacement, ecological restoration, laboratory services, energy and climate mitigation and adaptation. He has 23 years of experience in water resources engineering and environmental planning. You can find both biographies in the program, which is posted in the chat. So please join me in waving a warm welcome to Nathan Boone and Mark Camarada.
Well, thank you all for having us. I think I'll get our program started first by again thanking you all for hosting me today. Really grateful to see this program come together with the focus on sustainability, an issue that's really important to us here at the William Penn Foundation and to me personally, and to invite this special panel with Mark and myself, knowing Mark's commitment alongside my own to water resources for our region. I think it's an important topic and one I'm excited to share more with you about. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to get my presentation started. And to begin, I'm showing you here our, the title slide with a lovely image of the trail right along the Schuylkill River right here in Philadelphia. To invite you all to think with me a little bit here and reflect a little bit on how your experiences have been on and alongside our waterways, outdoors in nature this past year that we've all been kind of separated, many of us isolated in quarantine. So with kind of a quick informal poll, just reflect for yourself what your answer would be. Whether thinking about your time outdoors during this past year of COVID, has the pandemic made a difference in how you have spent time outdoors in parks or on trails? And compared to before the pandemic, are you spending, more time, less time, a little less, a lot less, or really thinking about more or less time or the same, no change? And I'll just, pause here for a moment while everyone reflects on their choices. And I'm interested in knowing how many of you, like myself, spent more time in the outdoors, considerably more time, in fact, for me personally. And I do see some hands raised, and that's certainly been a significant part of the popular narrative. We think about time outdoors, time in nature. This past pandemic year, I've seen, New Yorker cartoons making jokes about, dogs who are sick of getting taken on walks, and just for so much time spent outdoors. We've seen that translate into significant environmental policy victories with the Great Outdoors Act and permanent authorization of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, important legislations to fund our public parks. So there's definitely been a narrative of this surge in data that supported this surge in outdoor activity and enjoyment of nature. What's striking about this pattern is this trend is that we and our partners in the Circuit Trails Coalition issued a survey to some environmental justice communities in Norristown, Trenton, Southwest Philadelphia, and Camden to really ask this question of those communities and test their responses. And the result we got back surprised us, right? We're seeing a different narrative in terms of time spent outdoors, time spent in nature, that breaks down along racial lines. And for folks like myself, white individuals, spending more respondents were spending more time outdoors than we're spending less time outdoors. That's that blue response for the individuals surveyed who identified as white. For those individuals that identified as a person of color, African American, Latino, Latina, Asian Pacific Islander, for those individuals, we're seeing an opposite trend, where more than two times more people are spending less time outdoors during COVID than are spending more time outdoors. And it's just a striking relationship, a reversal of expectations based on, at least for me personally, my own experiences. And it's these patterns of impact and access to nature, access to the natural resources that are increasingly informing our grant making here at the William Penn Foundation and how we think about our investments and our work to support and restore the outdoors. So that was just a little kind of exercise here to hopefully get folks engaged, thinking about their own experiences in the context of this important work on sustainability. And I'll look forward to just sharing more about kind of the William Penn Foundation's grant making in this space. And I think a nice way to do that is with a short video we've put together that lays out our 3 strategies. So I'm going to play that video now, and then we'll turn to my remarks.
Clean water. More than 15 million people rely on the Delaware River watershed as their source of water. For years, pollution from industry and sewage treatment plants wreaked havoc on our rivers and streams. But over the last 40 years, steady progress has been made to restore our waterways. Still, major threats to water quality exist. The threats are varied and everywhere. We prioritized 4 of them and developed strategies where our focused funding and action can be a tipping point to accelerate conservation. Our funding is bringing together dozens of organizations to focus conservation work in carefully selected places. It's concentrating local projects to create a critical mass of results in each place, growing impact and support to do more. Along hundreds of miles of our region's trails, people come to appreciate the value of clean water while they exercise, commute, or just relax. Along those same trails, environmental centers are engaging visitors with the water in new ways. Together, the trails and centers connect thousands of people to our rivers and to the conservation movement. With our funding, advocacy campaigns are being informed by scientific evidence and successful local conservation projects. Policymakers and practitioners are using data, analysis, and evidence to make smart, informed decisions to drive change across the watershed. Together, these 3 strategies are creating new paths for collaboration. With science and teamwork, we're building the foundation for increased impact and long-lasting change.
So thanks for bearing with me there. Just a nice video laying out those 3 strategies that the foundation funds in right here in the Delaware River watershed. So home to Philadelphia, the Delaware River and its many tributaries, right? So including the Schuylkill that was, featured earlier, the Lehigh, the Cooper River in Camden, right? And all over 25,000 miles of tributaries and 13,000 square miles comprise the Delaware River watershed. Its waterways and the lands that drain to those waters. So you got a taste from that video of how the foundation's grant making, a total grant making budget of about $30-some million each year devoted to water quality, how that budget is distributed. We're really focused on this goal around clean water and creating the long-term conditions through a focus on conservation practice and real communities to plant trees, restore streams, advance green stormwater infrastructure projects, support agricultural best management practices on the ground in communities. We also have that layer of advocacy, policy, environmental journalism, and of course our work with constituencies to provide those positive on and near water experiences and help build support for the movement over time. And hopefully what you can begin to glean from that is a sense of this virtuous cycle that we're trying to support, where people who are having positive experiences in nature are in turn voicing their support for the policies that are going to mobilize funding and protections to lead to further improvements, further investments in real places, so that those places can in turn support more positive experiences in the outdoors, right? And we've got that virtuous cycle. But the choices we're making have consequences in terms of the patterns of investment that the foundation is making through its grants and where impact is being experienced and how that impact is being experienced. So the video mentions we've got these key stressors. We're focused on a subset of the many issues that impact surface water quality, healthy rivers and lands in our region, focused on forests and agriculture, stormwater, and that lack of connection, right? Like that engagement with the outdoors and with nature. And that leads us to a geographic footprint depending on where we're focused. Our advocacy support around impaired streams leads us to some impaired waterways, more so than others. Our support for public funding for the outdoors has a different impact depending on which county you reside in. And even our work to engage people in the outdoors or invest in specific places, right, is prioritizing a subset of the watershed through our trail network, our network of centers, or the targeted geographies where we're investing in protection and restoration through initiatives like the Delaware River Watershed Initiative. So we have to consider that pattern of investment and that pattern of impact and how it corresponds with demographic patterns for our region. And increasingly, that's an area that we're inviting and contemplating and trying to get a deeper understanding of, looking at where are the areas where communities of color are more heavily concentrated. Certainly right here at home in Philadelphia, but where else across that wider watershed landscape? And part of considering that impact and the equitable nature of that impact requires us to think about how the grants, the activities we're funding are relating to our ultimate goal. And we have these approaches in these three categories that are trying to build the conditions, establish the conditions necessary for clean water. The engaged communities, the strong regulatory protections, policies, and funding, and then these just thriving landscapes, right, that have lots of, with providing access to nature and supporting clean surface waters. But all of that takes time, right? It takes time to get from these approaches, the new trail opening to the engaged community, from the town hall meeting, from the new tree planted to that, to that healthy landscape, to that clean water outcome. And it invites us to think about how are our investments delivering positive benefits to communities in the meantime, right? Each of those, what are the near-term impacts of each of those grants, the paddling and cycling activities, the educational opportunities for youth that they're supporting, those positive press events, the energy, the regulatory decisions adding up piece by piece over time. And indeed, and I think perhaps most importantly, those investments on the ground, planting trees, protecting forested landscapes, installing vegetated practices like green stormwater infrastructure. What are those near-term impacts, those community benefits that are more immediately accessible, and how are they being experienced over time? So really beginning to ask ourselves questions about that pattern of investment and that pattern of both near-term and long-term benefit. There's an argument to be made, right, that anyone who lives downstream or who relies on the Delaware River for drinking water, as does all of Philadelphia, is benefiting in the long term, because of our support for clean water and source water protection. But in the meantime, who is being actively harmed by the stressors of forest loss, and even the absence of forest, right? Who is being harmed by the runoff coming off impervious surfaces, taking trash and litter to our streams, as you see here in this picture from the Tacony Creek in Philadelphia. Similarly, agriculture runoff has immediate near-term impacts, like we see with this harmful algal bloom that shut down some recreational lakes in northern New Jersey last summer, is an ongoing issue we have to think about. And that lack of watershed connection, whereas infrastructure and industry, whether current or legacy, infrastructure, shutting off access to the waterways and the benefits that they provide. So that question of where and how are the stressor aid across our landscape, who is being affected, just as we think about who benefits from our interventions, right? Here's American, Gothic, this the farmer, image here, but to really help illustrate how we have to think about with our grant making, to protect forests. That's a payment to a forest owner. To incentivize agricultural best management practices, that's a payment to a farmer. That street tree, that planting, that is an immediate near-term benefit for a resident of a neighborhood. And of course, outdoor enthusiasts, another really important group, are trying to connect to the outdoors. And we see groups like Trout Unlimited do exceptional work, just really outstanding work, connecting the angling community to our clean streams, mobilizing that recreational constituency to take action to protect and safeguard the resource. But again, we're inviting who amongst that recreational community are we lifting up and supporting, and both amplifying their voice on behalf of the resource, but also in terms of helping them have even greater access to that resource. So I'm going to play another short video for you guys here, just to, it's just a minute and a half or so, just another illustration, another way to think about that recreational community, not just in the far off trout streams of the Poconos, but right here at home in Philadelphia.
You're coming out of a concrete jungle where everything is noisy and chaos. Come down here and you're like in the wilderness. I look at the river, I sit on this river. I love this river. I watch a tide come in, I watch it go out. When I was a child, this river was polluted. If you came along, all you smelt was oil and sewage. We had the refineries, the slaughterhouse, you had DuPont lavatories. They dumped chemical waste. Over the last 20, 30 years or so, they've cleaned this river up unbelievable. What you see down here now didn't exist. Now when you look at the river, you'd never believe it was the same river. It's like 43 species of fish in here that would have never been in this river. Stripers in the spring and fall. You got shad coming through here. Plenty of white perch, bluegills. Another guy caught a muskie out of here. I didn't catch him, I wish I did, but I don't care what problem you got. Your bills, you got fired from a job, it doesn't make a difference. When you get on the river, it doesn't exist. It's like a tranquility. It's like nature. Wild but free.
So again, just a beautiful testimony by one of those constituents, right? We're trying to provide access, support in accessing positive opportunities in the outdoors. And those positive opportunities, those affirmative opportunities are happening right here in Philadelphia, right at places like Bartram's Garden, pictured there on the Lower Schuylkill, a portion of the river that long neglected, but making a remarkable comeback because of the progress of the Clean Water Act and rationing down on pollution, right? Clean Water Act will celebrate its 50th anniversary this year, but also because of these deliberate investment strategies to create these nodes of access, like Bartram's Garden, their dock infrastructure, the trail routes that connect them, and the programs, the active programs that connect them to and invite the community into partake of those programs, so that we can proactively address that imbalance that has been represented in the survey results, shown up front. In talking to the current executive director of a place like Bartram's Gardens, who's relayed that when she first started, some 8 or so years ago, Bartram's Gardens was thought by many in the immediately adjacent communities of Kings Essing and Southwest, it was thought to be private property. It was a destination for weddings, for a more privileged few, and many of the local residents, who include residents of a housing project literally right next door, assumed that it wasn't for them. It was not something they were invited into. And these dynamics, right, again, require intentional approaches, especially if we look across the environmental community we're trying to mobilize and connect with and support to advance these issues of sustainability. And I want to share a few points of data to illustrate what that urgency looks like for us right now. This data is a little older, but is from a really kind of seminal study done by Dr. Dorcetta Taylor, who's now with Yale University, but formerly with the University of Michigan, really helping to look at diversity within the environmental sector. And we know the U.S. population consists 38% comprised of persons of color. And that's roughly mirrored in the workforce, 34, 38%. And we look at the data for the environmental organizations, whether they're non-governmental organizations, like the grantees that the William Penn Foundation works with most closely, government agencies like Mark's, or philanthropies like the William Penn Foundation. You can see here from these numbers that individuals of color are just dramatically underrepresented as professionals in that space. And knowing that 38% of the population is a person of color, just a real striking disconnect. And that disconnect, again, I was mentioning, neglected to bring up this couple powerful statistics when I was talking about land ownership and our payments to forests to protect forests, payments to forest owners, or payments to farmers and ag producers to help make agricultural lands more sustainable. The owners of those forests, the owners of those agricultural lands, are also predominantly white and grossly out of proportion with the population. And there's data sets from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. There's older survey data, but still strong survey data that shows that it's about only 3 to 4% of farmland is owned by a person of color, and only 4 to 5% of large family-owned forests are held by families of color, based on available survey data. So just, again, striking disparity that we have to think about and be intentional about. And this is, of course, even made more urgent if we're thinking about the need to address this disparity and projected growth of diversity within our population. So the foundation is taking interventions, is taking steps to try and build, and we don't want to lose that talent. We want to bring that talent into our environmental movement, into the environmental sector. And that includes support for entry-level positions to bring more young people into the conservation and sustainability space, like is being done with the fellowship program, with the Alliance for Watershed Education, a network of 23 nature centers throughout the Delaware River watershed, but also at the leadership level with programs like Diverse Force on Boards right here in Philadelphia, who are connecting professionals of color to board positions to really lead the next, to provide that leadership to conservation organizations and others in that NGO sector, and make sure, again, that those organizations are inclusive and effective because of that. And it brings me to my really my last point here, which is about how an inclusive movement is a more powerful movement. This is a morally righteous direction to pursue in terms of equity for our country and and access to nature, et cetera. But it's also the smart move in terms of being more effective and at the goals we're trying to further. So this is a really compelling survey, a few years old now, but that was done in New Jersey, showing the difference in polling response between white voters and voters of color, and a consistently stronger response in favor of, or a stronger concern in this case, around the threats to our environment. And we see that consistently across other surveys that have been done nationally. This is just one of very few local examples I could share with you. And that has consequences for our, for our environmental agenda and for environmental progress. Just a couple an example to illustrate that, as we think about where we are in the political context and the political moment right now. And back in 2009, there was a lot of energy, in the climate space around cap and trade and possible cap and trade legislation with the Democratic, controlling, the Congress and in the White House. But the cap and trade bill, while it got a lot of momentum, it failed to secure the support of the Black Caucus. And that turned out to be, fatal to that bill's future and helping us get a jump on some really important climate, related issues. Going forward, we're seeing a much more diverse, much more intersectional coalition building around ideas like civilian climate corps, workforce programs that are not only addressing the climate and environmental issues, but also quality of life issues, jobs issues that are relevant to just a broader and more inclusive, set of stakeholders, and seeing support for that grow in ways that are really exciting. So to close out with you here, just a couple thoughts on what that looks like for the William Penn Foundation, what we're hoping to embrace looking ahead. Certainly it includes more responsive grant making, like the grants we were able to announce soon after the pandemic to provide support and soon after the tragic events with George Floyd's murder, grants directly focused on racial equity, building our capacity and our grantees' capacity to talk about, think about, and reflect these important social issues in our work and our decision making. And it also includes exciting plans, and programs to think about how our investments are providing near-term co-benefits in addition to that long-term water outcome, near-term co-benefits that are reaching more communities of color and delivering more equitable impact. Whether that is an urban agriculture plan that helps us think about how our investments in farmland and around ag runoff are reaching a more equitable population, or whether it's projects like this Delaware River Climate Corps concept that are helping us address our conservation and climate needs while delivering and creating jobs for those most in need. So with that, I thank you, for your time and attention, and look forward to any questions when we get to Q&A.
Well, thanks, Nate. Well, I'm going to hop right in. I think follow you up here, start sharing my screen. I don't know if you need to stop sharing your screen first, if you did that already. Yep. Good. Screen share. Oh, a little bit of issue. There we go.
You have the option?
Yeah, it wouldn't be a presentation
Okay.
without you seen anything yet?
The whole PowerPoint.
Okay.
So just start the slideshow.
All right. You see it?
Switch back to the OneNote form.
OneNote form. Funny. We already practiced this and I'm screwing it up already. Yeah.
Mark, if you select display settings up at the top, you can switch the screen that's showed. So all at the top of your screen, the display just to the right, see display settings.
Why am I missing display settings?
It looks like it's right next to your cursor.
Display settings and end slideshow.
How come I'm not seeing that on my?
Your cursor looks to be next to show taskbar and then display settings.
That literally is not.
Oh, funny.
Hang on, let me.
You want to stop it and start it again?
Yeah. That's my video. What am I missing here? I see mute my taskbar. Are you literally seeing a different screen than I am?
It would appear so.
Yeah.
When you
Let me stop sharing. Let me
Okay.
try this again. Apologies, everyone. We literally tried to.
No problem. Now we see the PowerPoint, so just start the slideshow, I think.
Yeah, you seen this pop-up window of all participants and host and sorry, let me get a.
No.
All right, what do we have here now?
You see the PowerPoint with the slides going down the left side.
Yeah, it's so strange.
Mark, if you stop sharing your screen and you start again, perhaps you can choose a different monitor to share with us, and that will help.
So funny.
But with the start screen, the Zoom start screen, share screen.
Try this guy here. Are we, you still seeing the note slide?
Yeah, but it's also running. It looks like it's currently it's got 2 minutes going. Maybe you need to stop it.
So strange. And when I advance, you still see the note slide, right? Not the,
Yeah.
how are we, all right, maybe I get rid of the second screen here, then we,
Okay.
yeah, let me do that. I'm very tech savvy usually, so apologies here. All right. See
There you go.
Yeah, yeah. Jeez.
That looks like the full screen.
All right, I had to just share a different screen. Well, thank you. Severe apologies, technical difficulties always there. I just wanted to start by saying thank you to Ben, to Megan, to Sue for inviting me here today, for Nate for allowing me to share the virtual stage with him. Thank you, Nate, so much for really, I think, setting the right tone, the right stage here of what a healthy water environment, what clean water, what engaged kind of citizens can do to make a city really thrive. So I really appreciate you laying the groundwork there. It's also nice to see some names and faces in the attendee list here: Dennis, Marianne, Spencer, Alex, and see some new faces and names, make some new friends here. So thanks for bearing with me through those technical difficulties, and let's hop right in here. So, you know, you always have to start with who we are as a water department. So I'm going to put up some boring stats here. I'm not going to go through them in too much detail. The reason I have this slide here is to show that the water department is a one water utility. You hear that phrase every once in a while. What is one water? Well, we're responsible for drinking water. We're responsible for treating wastewater, and we're responsible for managing stormwater for over about 1.6 million people in the region here. We have lots of facilities, 3 major treatment plants to treat wastewater, 3 drinking water treatment plants, over 7,000 miles of pipes that, you know, move water around throughout our entire city, lots of pump station, lots of different things we do here. You can see how they're spatially distributed. And our major emphasis on stormwater management gets a lot of credit for Green City Clean Waters and what we do from sustainable stormwater management side of the business. So obviously how these things all come together really show how our philosophy and our approach for how we protect our water supply. Our core function. So I know Nate was talking a lot about the Delaware watershed, and my responsibility here today was to try to focus a little bit more on the Schuylkill. So I'm going to try to give a little more of a Schuylkill bent, but for those that know me, it's hard to stay on task. So you'll get some Schuylkill, but you'll get a bit more than that. So when we think of the Schuylkill River, and again, Nate kind of set the stage quite a bit here of what is a healthy water environment? What do we need to do to really protect our urban water resources? And these are some of the things. We protect the water by managing the land appropriately and managing the water supply. We think about water quality and quantity and how we treat the water, how we distribute the water, make sure it's safe, reliable, and abundant. We also know that there's that connection, accessibility to water and the water environment. Why, you know, restore, treat, you know, improve the water environment if people don't appreciate, you know, can't connect to it and enjoy, you know, the benefits from it. And we do this all in partnership, right? We do nothing alone. And you know, a lot of you on attending the meeting today are part of that partnership that allow us to provide the services we do as a water department. So we have a lot of responsibilities. I mentioned water, wastewater, drinking water. We have a lot of permit responsibilities. We have to deal with combined sewer overflows, separate stormwater, pipes in the city. We're responsible for the streams and the aquatic habitat. We have to protect the water supply for a large region. We do this in conjunction with our stakeholders, right? The 2 million people or so in the region that benefit from the services we provide. And we're trying to think about integration and long-term watershed-wide investment. And this kind of led to a philosophy 2 decades ago of integrated watershed management. How do we make sure that when we make decisions, we think about how it affects a variety of our responsibilities, not just today, but into the future. So really kind of drilling into the Schuylkill watershed. Some of you may be very familiar with the size of the shed. Nate showed a bit of it in his map, definitely more of the Delaware River Basin. This is really just the Schuylkill River Basin. 2,000 square miles, 130 miles long, part of 11 counties, and is the drinking water source supply for over 2 million people, and is the largest trib to the Delaware River. But what's interesting, as you can see from the graphic here, 2% of the watershed is within the boundaries of the city of Philadelphia. So, with that in mind, we had to do source water protection assessments back in 2002. And the goal was to really identify priority sources of impairment in all that contributing watershed area. And as you can imagine, the upper extent of the watershed, forested and mining, you see a lot of agriculture. As you move closer to Philadelphia, you start seeing that mixed development. And then the Philadelphia region itself with the Schuylkill and the surrounding counties, highly urbanized, highly developed. And those are some of the issues that we started to see associated with each of these regions, right? Abandoned mine and metal related issues, ag runoff, a lot of kind of pollutants, pathogens, bacterias, phosphorus and nitrogens in the ag area. And then as you get more into the urban environment, sediment, high sediment, runoff due to erosion, due to high stream velocity and water velocity. So that was a way for us to assess the priority sources of impairment. So right around 2002, we started to work with the EPA, the DEP, and a lot of the partners, some private water companies as well, like Aqua, Exelon, the Partnership of the Delaware Estuary, really started to figure out how do we really think about the watershed as a whole. What do we do to come together collectively? We formed what is known as the Schuylkill Action Network, which really was about watershed-wide coordination that had these kind of 4 pillars that you're seeing in the graphic here: stewardship, education and knowledge transfer, engagement of key constituents, and actually delivering some projects where we could actually address, acid mine drainage, stormwater through best management practice implementation. So the SAN was made up of water suppliers, conservation district, nonprofits, and other stakeholders. And what we started to do was award grants for kind of protecting the upstream water supply through, targeted awards, I think, of around $4 or $5 million total to date, that really started to leverage investments from all the companies you're seeing on the left to really start to bring around some projects to address ag runoff and AMD and urban stormwater. So just some examples of projects here. This is in New Philadelphia, PA, completed in 2010. Basically acidic abandoned mine drainage from a creek mine was flowing into the Schuylkill River, polluting it with metals, raising the pH. We partnered with a few companies to install a passive treatment system, as you're seeing on the next slide. And what happens is the acid mine drainage water is collected in the scour pool. It can slow down, spread across the area, basically settle out a lot of the metals, go through these kind of treatment cells. And basically the system treats, thousands of gallons of water per minute and has been doing so for many years to date. So you can see how a project up in that AMD section of the Upper Schuylkill protects the water supply for all those that live downstream from it. This second project here is an agricultural manure management project at a farm up in Kempton, PA. The USDA funded a bit of this. Schuylkill River Restoration Fund as well. This was done in 2014. And basically, the farm installed a manure storage location that captured the runoff from the cattle, and basically, the manure water that was going directly into the creek, and obviously again, flowing downstream into water supply, is now captured, treated, drained, and it's not just cow manure; it was fertilizers and other things as well. So instead of being directed into a nearby creek, it's now kind of captured and treated. So you can see how these little targeted BMPs up in the upper extent of the water body, affect our water supply, downstream. So moving back into a little more Philly centered, right? That's some of the projects, some of the examples of what we do in the upper Schuylkill to protect the water supply in the lower Schuylkill. What are we doing here in the Philadelphia specific region? And most of what we do is driven by regulations and requirements. So I have two of them listed here with our municipal separate storm sewer system and our combined sewer system permits. And for those not familiar, about 60% of our city is served by combined sewers, the area in the pink here, which means you have a commingling. You have one pipe that takes the sanitary flow from your house and mixes it with the rainwater during wet weather events. But about 40% of our city, the area in white, is served by separate sewerage systems, which means there's a sanitary pipe that takes water to your treatment plants, and the storm pipe takes the water directly to the nearby stream. So we kind of have two different permits that allow us to figure out, that require that we, manage stormwater runoff and urban runoff in a variety of ways. So our municipal separate storm sewer systems, kind of the boring part, but it's obviously just as important as protecting our water supply, is a lot of these things where we do appropriate housekeeping on city facilities, making sure that we're taking care of what we do from municipal operations standpoint. We do inlet cleaning. We do a lot of illicit connections. Anyone that has kind of inappropriate plumbing and pipes that connect directly to a storm line that's causing pollutant loading to our water bodies needs to be mitigated and abated. We're responsible for monitoring and controlling pollutants from industrial sources, making sure that we're doing the appropriate street sweeping, and when we do snow removal, that we're doing appropriate salt treatments. So these are things that protect our water environment through kind of very very kind of specific point source responsibilities. One of the other key elements is actually looking at the natural land. So how do we actually maintain the land in an appropriate fashion, but also make sure that the water environment that has been impacted by what's happening on the land is restored as well. So just showing some photos, I think, of the more sustainable nature-based approaches for how we kind of think about our water environment. And upper left is a stormwater treatment wetland up on the Montashone Creek. You have Weiss's Mill, Bell's Mill, Cresshon Creek are all tributaries to the main stem Wissahickon, which is upstream of the drinking water intake at Queen Lane on the Schuylkill River. So a lot of these practices are not just about nature-based, natural stream design. All these are done in a way to allow the water to access the floodplain. We reduce stream velocity. We manage pollutant loads, and ultimately, a healthier stream means a healthier trib, means a healthier main stem of your water body, which is another practice to maintain and improve our drinking water source as well. Our combined sewer area approach. These are more stormwater management practices that we do in the combined sewer area of the city, and we deliver them through three major major pipelines here. We have stormwater regulations, incentivized retrofits, and public retrofits. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to show you some of the glam photos. But in Philadelphia, we have stormwater regulations in place that require any land development, new development or redevelopment that triggers an earth disturbance of 15,000 square feet or more is responsible for managing the runoff from the site for water quality, channel protection, and flood control. So here you're just seeing some natural practices incorporated into the development sites. And some of these are in the Schuylkill watershed. So I think one of them may not be. But you can see how stormwater management, nature-based design is integrated into the landscape to really bring about some aesthetic improvements, but also provides an environmental function, and again, protects our water supply and improves the health and ecosystem as well. I mentioned incentivized retrofit to kind of cut out a lot of the details there. Basically, we charge your stormwater bill when you're a resident of Philadelphia. We charge you for the stormwater you generate based on your impervious cover and your land area. So those that generate more runoff pay more. Those that generate less or have a smaller parcel, they pay less. So what we did is we have an incentivized retrofit program where for those that have a lot of impervious cover, we actually award grants, competitive grants, but we also give you a stormwater fee reduction on your bill for managing the land. So here's an example of Lee Elementary, where I'll toggle back, just the amount of bill before, the size of the treatment, and they're able to get a monthly credit by managing that land a little bit better. So we see a lot of our incentivized retrofits, throughout the city on a lot of industrial, commercial parcels, some of these school sites as well. But really, it's an amazing kind of public partnership program that incentivizes sustainable stormwater management on sites. The other element of our delivery of kind of green infrastructure, nature-based design is direct public investment. So here's just some photos of what we do to invest in public facilities. So the photo, above the words there, it's the parking lot at the Philadelphia Zoo. Some of you may be familiar. It may just look like vegetation to some, but it's actually a stormwater management practices. It's a rain garden. The photo in the upper left is at Parkside Edge by the Concourse Lake Centennial, lake area of the city in West Fairmount Park. And again, engineered, manicured rain gardens that act as sustainable stormwater management practices. And the photo in the lower left corner is a green roof on Venice Island off of Main Street, Manayunk. So ways for us, again, to think about managing water at the source, treating it as more of a resource, not letting it get into our pipes, which then, mix with other pollutants and cause impacts to the water body. So some examples of our public investments for managing water. I provide a link here for those interested to see, well, what kind of practices are near me. We have a tool called the Big Green Map, which shows our progress to date. We've been implementing green infrastructure at scale for over 10 years now. You can see we have 800 sites throughout the city. So these are going to be private development sites, incentivized retrofits, and public retrofits like green streets and rain gardens at parks and rec locations, city facilities, schools, other locations. We also think about what does make it to the water body. So some of you may have seen some boats, scooting around the Schuylkill River. We have a skimming vessel called the R.E. Roy, named after a former water department commissioner. We have pontoon vessels where we do hand skimming. So here's some folks in action on the Schuylkill River itself. So it's not just about managing water upstream. It's not just managing water on the land to prevent it from getting in the pipes, but sometimes materials and things do make its way into the water body. And we have an approach for capturing trash as well once it makes its way into the water body. We're not, again, just thinking about what's happening today in our systems right now. We obviously are clearly thinking about future watershed conditions, and some are out of our control. Land development upstream. We talked about ag runoff. Just a lot of pharmaceuticals and other things. But the one that's really kind of jumping out to us that causes a lot of concern for the water environment is obviously a changing climate. And I don't think I need to go into too much detail with this audience of, we're seeing the effects of it now. A lot of the data is showing that we're going to be seeing increasing, more frequent, more intense precipitation. We're going to see higher heat periods here in Philadelphia, rising seas. And a lot of folks, may not make that connection when we say sea level rise, but we are in an estuary. So we are seeing, tidal flows in the lower Schuylkill and the Delaware all the way up to Trenton. So, we are seeing storm surge and rising seas that are causing effects, having some effects now, but will do so in the future as well. So we're thinking about, adaptation planning on a 100-year horizon or end of the century horizon. So about 80 years, from now, thinking about where are we vulnerable from an asset standpoint, what kind of strategies can we put to place, and what can we really implement? So, protecting our water resources now and into the future by using actionable science and adaptation strategies. And again, this is not just the water department. This is the city of Philadelphia is going to need to come together. The region will need to come together to think about some of these adaptation strategies. Wanted to show too that we're not just doing this locally, regionally. It is about networking. It is about collaboration. It is about partnerships. We're one of 12 entities that are part of the Water Utility Climate Alliance. These 12 entities, believe it or not, serve drinking water for over 50 million people in the United States. So they were intentionally selected by being big authorities, big utilities with responsibilities for probably about a seventh of all the population in this country, and the drinking water management behind it. Connecting more of the local partnerships, thinking about academia and taking advantage of a lot of the strong local universities we have to really help us think about improvements, whether it's working with Rutgers on hydrodynamic and stream modeling, working with Lehigh to think about pollutant tracking of concern. We work with Drexel on monitoring green infrastructure performance, and Villanova working with the University of Penn on tap water, drinking more tap water campaigns. You can see how important it is to engage the community around us to protect our water environment now and into the future. One other creative thing too is the Aquatic Research and Restoration Center, thinking about innovation, thinking about more natural approaches for us to use species like freshwater mussels to actually help treat water, clean water. They are filter loving critters. So we are working on a mussel hatchery, working with Bartram's. We have some work at the Fairmount Waterworks on the Schuylkill as well. We've done American shad restoration and have done some work as well on fish passage at the Fairmount Dam and the Schuylkill Fishway. We're looking at living shorelines initiatives. So how do we actually think about appropriate plantings and vegetation and distribution of these bivalves in a way that we can seed them into the environment where they actually help us with water quality, and even thinking about shell recycling, oyster shell recycling programs. So working with Bartram's Gardens, Seaport Museum, partnership with the Delaware Estuary, just a lot of folks thinking about advancing science and innovation. So just coming to the close here with the last couple slides here. We talk about what we're responsible for, from fishable, swimmable, drinkable. These are things we have to do to meet Clean Water Act and Safe Drinking Water Act, pH, streams law and rules. But we're also here to think about the safe, attractive, accessible, just, equitable approaches to what we do. So our infrastructure is getting older. There's more regulations coming. We can only afford so much. So there's a constant, push and pull of, what it is we need to deliver through appropriate rates. And while we watch kind of these expenses grow, which is even more important as to why integration, communication, collaboration are more and more important for us to figure out how to balance, priorities. So I'll end with this slide of how do we measure success? How do we show that the Schuylkill and the Delaware are improving? I think Nate's video of that testimonial of that gentleman, fishing, talking about progress made, in the last 20, 30, 40 years. He said it, right? All the words that I'm going to throw out here don't mean much more than what he did. He's watching the resurgence of our water environment. But when you look at what we've done from an aquatic health improvement, we're seeing the returning of shad and sturgeon to the Schuylkill and the Delaware. We're increasing the number of fish crossing that we see at the fish ladder in the Schuylkill, so allowing for the safe migration and breeding of fish that haven't been able to do that, cut off by man-made infrastructure. We're seeing massive investments in how we control combined sewer overflows through green infrastructure and other capital plans at our treatment plants. We're seeing a local economy grow by leveraging investments, environmental restoration through the Schuylkill River Restoration Fund, through some of those sand projects. I mentioned the freshwater mussel hatchery and the aquatic restoration center, and almost $8 million of investment coming from Penvest. We talked a bit about regional partnerships like the Schuylkill Action Network, the academic partnerships, this commitment to data and science for how we plan for future challenges. So those are just some of the successful for measures of what we're seeing on the Schuylkill, in the Delaware, and in the city of Philadelphia as well. And then just some links to get a ton more information about our program.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
And Nate, I do have a couple questions from the chat, which I'll get to. And then if anybody else has questions, you can just raise hands or unmute. But I'll just start. It was a question about the climate changes. Mark, you addressed most of it right after the question came out. But the question was, how is the impact of climate change affecting your long-term strategic plan? So if you have anything else to add on that, or Nate, if however that relates to you, if they speak on that.
Yeah. Nate, do you want to hop in there first?
Sure, I can share a little bit of our thinking around climate change. And, there certainly it's lending newfound urgency to the investments and strategies we're already pursuing, but also given where we are in climate and the opportunity to see action on climate, particularly with the priorities of the current administration, the federal administration, we're seeing a real nexus of opportunity around infrastructure, resilience, and workforce. So you saw that concept around the Civilian Climate Corps and what that could mean for our region that brings some of that together. But it's looking at a definition of infrastructure that includes natural infrastructure and nature-based solutions, investment strategies that are building a more just and resilient community. So certainly thinking about climate resilience as well as racial justice and how those investments are feeding into communities, and ensuring they're connecting to workforce, ensuring that the labor we're mobilizing to steward those investments, to get those projects constructed, that labor is leading into pathways for careers and sustainable careers. So a few thoughts there on kind of how we're trying to, I think, position ourselves to deliver in this moment on climate.
Yeah, and we've been thinking about, obviously a changing climate from a mitigation and an adaptation standpoint. We've been mitigating by looking at alternative energy sources. We've done some biogas cogeneration, at one of our treatment plants where we harvest the biogas and we use it as a fuel source. We looked down at the airport. We take their airplane de-icing fluid. We actually feed it into our digesters, and that produces some biogas that we then use as an energy source. Those are some mitigation strategies. We have some solar arrays down at our plants as well. But we're really thinking about adaptation, and they touched on that a bit with a lot of our natural mitigation, what we're doing from a sustainable infrastructure, green infrastructure standpoint. But we're also thinking about engineered, how we're engineering our facilities differently, how we're adapting structures, whether they're elevated or they're relocated where we can. We're about to make actually started about a $3 billion 25-year investment in a drinking water master plan, where we're going to be making significant modifications to our 3 drinking water plants. All of that has, we have the opportunity there to site them, design them, accordingly for, a changing climate. So, there's a lot of words that get used in thinking about climate strategies: protection, retreat, avoidance. But I heard yesterday that we can't forget about knowledge and collaboration as 2 elements there as well. We have to prepare our communities for a changing climate. We may not be able to engineer our way out of it. We may have to, figure out some other things. But definitely something extremely important to us, how the water environment is changing, will continue to change, and we need to be prepared for it. But it will take significant investment and significant collaboration to do what we need to do to prepare us for a changing climate.
There was a question about the rail park. It was going to integrate stormwater drainage in its design that would cross the city. Do you know if that's still in the works? I guess that's for either of you.
Yeah. That I don't know. I could look into that.
Certainly, it exceeded the threshold under which it's required to manage its own stormwater runoff, and did incorporate stormwater management features to comply with the regulations. So there are those features integrated into that park and that design that Brian Haynes Studios came up with. I would add that part of what is also exciting about those types of projects is that we're also seeing not only are they meeting their own obligation for their own footprint in the city, but increasingly, with the water department and other partners, trying to think about how those projects can not only manage their own runoff, but the runoff for adjacent properties, runoff for the public right of way. So they can just deliver greater benefit for the combined sewer overflow issue that's addressing.
Okay, there was a question specifically about how long it takes water to travel from forest areas to the city and the Delaware. But I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about how the water comes from all of the places to our drinking water. So for example, if it's coming from, I guess, the Schuylkill, everything that feeds the Schuylkill sort of north and west down to the city, and then the Delaware is coming from all the way up north. I'm not even sure how far past or in New York it goes. Are they all meeting where there's one or two places that we get our water and it's processed along the way? How does that work?
Yeah, I think the Schuylkill was 130 miles long. But yeah, it takes days. It takes days for the water in the upper Schuylkill to make its way down to the Philadelphia area. But I'm trying not to be crude here, but yeah, we are at the bottom end of everyone else's water. So there's a lot of upstream, wastewater treatment plants. There's a lot of activities that happen upstream. That is our drinking water when it makes its way down here. We pull our water from the Schuylkill and the Delaware. The two locations in Philadelphia is Queen Lane and Belmont, which are, one is right by the Wissahickon Creek, the confluence of the Wissahickon and the Schuylkill. That's where our Queen Lane plant is. And Belmont is across from real close to Boathouse Row. So those are our two intakes on the Schuylkill where we pull in water, and the 2,000 miles of drainage area upstream, anything that happens up there is in our drinking water supply, which is why it's so important for not just regulations, but for us thinking about collaborative efforts to kind of, protect that supply. We have a Delaware Valley early warning system, which I think is really interesting to point out. But anytime there's a spill or any kind of contamination event, there is an actual blast notification that goes out to many folks that are responsible for the water environment. We could either shut down intakes or we could stop kind of processes that rely on that water supply. So it's a way for us to think about for any kind of issues, whether a gas station has an oil spill, or we've seen some issues where tankers of rail vehicles kind of fell off the tracks and did some stuff. But we have an understanding through a lot of modeling of transit times and pollutant loading and dilution and all these kind of things to figure out what is happening in the water environment, and when do we have to either treat differently at our treatment plants or maybe even shut down an intake during a catastrophic event. Your point about the Delaware, yeah, the water goes up real far into New York. We rely a lot on the Delaware River Basin Commission, is responsible for a lot of water withdrawal and water supply regulation between New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. And the Army Corps is involved as a fifth member to really make decisions of how the water is managed on a basin standpoint. So yeah, there's a lot of good collaboration, regulatory based and state based that help us protect the water environment.
It's a great question and opportunity to think about how our region in the watershed connects us and how interconnected it is. And a compelling point, Mark points out about Philadelphia essentially being, at the bottom of this system that receives inputs from others. But we're not we're near the bottom, but we're not at the bottom. The communities of Chester, Wilmington, the estuary and Bay Shore have to deal with what Philadelphia sends down. So I want to share a quote from the environmental writer Wendell Berry, who I think put it really nicely when he wrote, we need to do onto those downstream as we would have those upstream do unto us. So the watershed version of the golden rule. But yeah, those connections are real and we have to manage for them.
Justin, did you want to ask about water, I guess, recycling or reuse?
Sure, yeah. Thank you. So great presentation on both parts. I liked a lot of it. Before Kimley Horn, I was with Biohabitat, so I was excited that you touched upon the living shorelines and the bivalve implementation and all that. I do a lot of water reuse in my practice, which isn't something that's really big here in Philadelphia. And when I've kind of broached the subject with some folks, whether at the city or just other designers, people often dismiss it because we don't really have a water supply issue here. However, I think it could be part of a larger strategy to reduce base flows in our sewer system to avoid CSOs. And if we were to get larger buildings or larger developments to implement wastewater reuse on site, whether it's for toilet flushing or ornamental irrigation, things like that, and otherwise reduce their flows going to the sanitary sewer. I'm wondering if PWD, if maybe that's not discussed or included as part of the overall strategy of our river health, because it's already been assessed and deemed that it wasn't really that impactful in terms of the volumes that would be reduced, or whether that's something that has yet to really be assessed in detail.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great question. We were a little restricted a decade or so ago from, believe it or not, kind of the plumbing unions about how to build in harvesting systems and interior plumbing and waterless toilets. There was a little bit of a politics and union related activity there. Once we got through that, we have seen a bit more of folks thinking about harvesting and reuse. The only issue is, based on our storm frequency, we have to make sure that there is a beneficial, abundant use of that water. So if you were going to store it in cisterns, you have to make sure that the stormwater systems are there for the next storm that occurs 2 or 3 days later. A lot of times you don't necessarily irrigate after a rain event, which is when you usually have some stored water to use. So stormwater harvesting and reuse is not gotten a lot of lift off because we need to make sure that those storm systems are there to capture the next chunk of water. So our regulations are kind of written in a way that you have to manage water accordingly. We haven't seen much of wastewater kind of reuse at this point and treatment. I think those systems are still relatively novel, and I think are not haven't really been implemented. But I do see that on the horizon in the future. I mean, these kind of zero runoff sites, whether it's storm runoff or waste contribution, I mean, I think that's where the ultimate sustainability movement will end up. So we encourage some of the stormwater, but it's a bit hard. The wastewater, we don't necessarily have any incentive to do it yet, but I would imagine it's coming.
This doesn't get to your question or the specific kind of facility scale, building scale, but I would lift up the ethos that motivated some of the early thinking in Philadelphia and elsewhere across the watershed around the role that natural infrastructure can play and the role of infiltration. Right? Mark referenced, stormwater controls that are frequently using cisterns to temporarily store water and slow release it into our wastewater treatment system. But the opportunities to have more natural surfaces and practices that are infiltrating water into the groundwater, into that, into stream base flow is another way we can avoid losing that resource from the system, another way to recycle and reuse. And we see practices like that happening across the river in New Jersey, in South Jersey, which has a shallow superficial aquifer, the Kirkwood-Cohansey, which is another significant drinking source, and groundwater recharge, aquifer recharge is being very fully embraced over there as a way to kind of reuse that what would otherwise be a waste product.
So Marianne, our partner from Building Industry Association, had a question about the Parkway. I can just read it. Marianne went to the Parkway event, More Park, Less Way. Is PWD involved in this project in terms of GSI opportunities?
You guys really tested my knowledge of I know we were working with parks to do some practices. I don't think I included one of the photos of the Parkway subsurface infiltration trench, but I know we did work with them on a few projects. I could get you some more specific locations where we've partnered, but there are stormwater treatments done on the Parkway. Some were regulated, and some were done in partnership, with city folks. But there is a fair amount of water managed on the Parkway in a few locations. I just don't know specifically, what stretches.
I was referring to there was a new there had a kickoff for the design teams for reimagining the Parkway.
Okay.
And Mike Carroll was there, and so they're doing a tour and analysis now. The three people that were shortlisted, and I was just thinking that they're thinking about making less roadway.
Yeah.
So thinking that there's opportunities there for GSI.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we have our district planners, I'm sure, all over that. But yeah, it's always interesting to try to convince people that less roadway is good. That's always been a challenge. So we'll see how that comes to be. But even if there is roadway, I mean, I will say there's ways for us to sustainably manage that stormwater. So there's that benefit. But what we don't benefit from kind of the heat island, effects of impervious cover, we at least can get the benefits of managed stormwater and the quality and quantity benefits there. But I'll look into that. It's a good question, Marianne. I'll talk to our planners and see how active we are there.
Do either of you work with other city agencies, streets departments, et cetera, to address trash in the streets to avoid its impact on the rivers? And any other construction? There's some construction people here, so any other, I guess, legislation or anything related to that?
Yeah, it was unfortunate. One of the effects of the financial issues with the pandemic was kind of the retirement of the zero waste and litter cabinet that was established as part of the mayor's office. I don't want to say dissolution or what the right phrase is, but we were, as a city, did have a cabinet that was thinking about short dumping, was trying to find hot spots for trash locations. We were building kind of an inventory of locations throughout the city where we were seeing a lot of trash and litter. That position was cut about 6 or 8 months ago. We don't know if it'll come back. But I mean, our role as a water department, through inlet cleaning, most of our inlets or catch basins that you see on the streets, the grates, have traps in there. So think about it as your kind of, interior plumbing where debris can go in, water goes out, but the debris stays in the inlets. So we're required to clean inlets by permit. Every inlet needs to be cleaned on average once a year. So we remove a lot of the litter from inlets. So it's a major way for us to collect trash. We also have a lot of public education to prevent people from throwing trash into the inlets. They're not trash collectors. You may see some of those little stickers that are on our inlets that play, no dumping, drains to river. So there's a public education standpoint, but we do have a massive workforce to remove debris from the streets. The streets department does street sweeping, but not nearly enough. And there has been a big push. But again, another, I think, impact of financial constraints on the city was to increase the frequency of street sweeping. I personally don't feel like street sweeping does a lot for trash collection. Our inlets do the bulk of the work of how it's captured. But yeah, there is a major trash issue in this city, and it hasn't gotten the level of attention as it should. And I know, Nate, you tried, your best to figure out a way to support some additional trash evaluations and ways to kind of, use philanthropy to kind of kickstart a few more city initiatives, but it's been challenging to really address the trash issue.
Well, I will lift up one that we're excited to be supporting in partnership with the Commerce Department. recognizing that that trash and litter has this quality of life impact as well as impact on the health of our waterways, and certainly a visual and aesthetic impact. Where with commerce, we're looking at the Philadelphia Taking Care of Business program that Commerce operates to hire locals through neighborhood community organizations to do street sweeping, litter removal, and address vandalism issues along the commercial corridors. It's a $10 million a year program reaching some 83 groups across all the commercial corridors in the city. And through some grant support for partners at the Overbrook Environmental Education Center, we were able to pilot an additional program of training to take those predominantly gentlemen who are doing that street sweeping work and integrate a host of new green workforce training and skill sets around plant identification, landscaping and horticulture, and indeed environmental awareness and how the natural system function, how that inlet, why a shortcut to dumping your sweepings after you're done isn't just to put them down the stormwater inlet, how and why that connects to the system. And that pilot was completed this past summer over COVID and trained and deployed 9 of those cleaning ambassadors with that new skill set, with that new knowledge. And we're excited and hopeful that models like Civilian Climate Corps can help integrate more of those skills in land care and ecological horticulture into positions like that.
Thanks, Nate. And to add to that as well, I should mention Power Corps, our green infrastructure maintenance, does collect a lot of trash. We do have a workforce that goes and maintains, those sites, obviously, throughout the city. So there's a fair amount of trash removal, vegetative work that happens there. So we are, not just the inlets, but any street materials as well. And it doesn't necessarily need to be in the practice. When we go maintain the practice itself, we'll look upstream, up street and down street and kind of remove litter from the street as well. We also have a waterways restoration team, which goes into our stream systems, removes tires, large debris, anything like that, in addition to that floatable skimming vessels that you saw on the Schuylkill and the Delaware. So we kind of have the approach to manage it in the inlets or on the land or even in the streams through a variety of practices. But more could always be done. But I really think it starts with an education. Starts with the public. If that stuff doesn't end up on the land, it doesn't end up in the rivers. And also a lot of times what we see in the rivers itself are what come from upstream, which don't have trapped inlets. So a lot of the debris we see in or near our shorelines, some of it's, a lot of it's not even from Philadelphia. It's what washes up from upstream.
So I just wanted to conclude by asking you, Nate or Mark, excuse me, if there's ways that people want to get involved or help. I assume there's information on your websites, but is there anything you want to mention that we can do, or specific links for volunteering or anything like that?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Certainly, I would encourage folks to think about, civic engagement as one of the most important ways in which they can get involved in making positive change in this space. There's lots of, volunteer and, opportunities, or heck, get out there and enjoy the resource, right? Lots of opportunities to do that. But when we're talking about the scale of the climate crisis, the scale of the changes we need, to achieve the goals of fishable, swimmable waterways for all those waterways in the city, as well as in that more rural landscape, civic engagements, what's required. And there is a great resource in the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed that is looking holistically across this whole geography, as well as many efforts that are focused on your watershed, your local waterway. But that's a great point of entry that, and the Foundation's website certainly can help you discover a wealth of links.
Yeah, it is a great question. Staying active, being vocal. I mean, we have, most of the time, utilities, we're providing services and we only hear the complaints, right? When someone's been shut off, or, they have a flooded basement or construction activity. But we do have a lot of events. We do have all of our social media outlets. We do Fish Fest on the, on the river. We do ribbon cuttings at our sustainable, stormwater practices. We want to hear from folks. If you're flooding, let us know. But if there's something you like, let us know as well. So I think really, we make a lot of decisions, right? Everyone funds what they prioritize. And if we hear more and more from our ratepayers and our constituents, what they do like, and I think it helps us, program better. So yeah, just being aware, being educated on the services we provide, the things we're trying to do, may even make it easier for us to have the rate structure we need to do more. We always, there's a phrase in the water industry that we're devaluing, water. People don't know what it's providing until they don't have it, right? I mean, try to go half a day without water. I wouldn't even ask go a day without water. Go half a day without, any kind of water in your house, and let me know how you feel. So it's really just, staying informed and educated, and our website offers a lot of materials. But there's a lot of things. If you're a business, there's ways to stay engaged. If you want to do a site retrofit, please do. If you're a resident, we have a rain check program, which is about rain barrels or rain gardens, or even doing some, small scale stuff on your own property. So depends on who you are and what your level of activity is. But I'll agree with Nate. Enjoy the waterways that way you can, be active, appreciate it, and that'll get our attention.
Terrific. Well, thank you, both of you, for taking your time and preparing the presentations and joining us. Thanks everybody for coming. Just watch your email for upcoming events. And of course, we have 2 more in this series in September and October. So I just want to thank everybody again for coming and participating.
A pleasure.